Good afternoon, everybody. Morning. I think it's still morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming. I want to warn you, I'm confined to this. Normally, I like to pace, but this is being broadcast online, so I'm confined to this this general area. So if I pull me back in, if I get a little bit off track. Well, thank you all for coming. How's finals week? Good? Yeah. Hey, who's ready for Christmas break or holiday break? Yeah. Who's stuck here still working? Yes, thank you all. Me too. Yes, we appreciate that. We keep the building running. Well, thank you all for coming. We're, as you can see from the slide here, we have two different. We've been trying to think of ways to get the conversation going regarding guided pathways and opportunities to get involved in conversations on campus about how we can look at our student life cycle and how we might be able to ask questions about what are the processes that we have that are in place that in regards to the student life cycle, and are there ways that we could maybe address some issues with that might facilitate our students having a little bit easier go of it while they're here. Our goal is to really have two forums, one today, and realizing this is finals week and knowing that it's not an ideal time for everybody, we're going to repeat it more or less on January 18th, which I think is a second week. Is that the second week? It's a Friday of the second week of winter quarter. So you're welcome to come back then if things come to mind in the interim, and we can address them then. But I plan on not altering this too much. I might change it a little bit just to make it entertaining for myself. Also, what we hope to have is many opportunities, and I'll highlight some of these towards the end of my talk. Have a lot of opportunities to just have candid dialogue about how we're doing on campus with regard to completion rates, retention, and the kind of hard questions that we never really take a time to have a conversation about, but yet we know that they're really meaningful for our students in terms of their abilities to be successful. This is really my goal for the day, roughly a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about why guided pathways and why now. I really, as part of that, want to really look at and answer the question, what is really guided pathways? What does that mean? I think there's a lot of question marks about what that means in general, and in particular, what does that mean for this campus, right? And to do that, I think we have to look at the data. And so we want to look at, I'll walk you through some of the data. It was really an opportunity for me, I think, to, as I learn more about the college, to get more engaged in the college and try to understand what are the processes that we have here that impact our students' ability to be successful, and what are the data, and just be honest about that. And so I'll share some of my observations with you about that, and I'm certain that that in and of itself will prompt a lot of questions and dialogue. From that, I do want to try to talk a little bit about what it means to be a guided pathways college. Again, I think there's a lot of fear and preconceived ideas about what that really means, and I really want to put to rest the idea that there is this some kind of guided pathways a recipe book that we pull off the shelf and we plug into Lane. All of us have been engaged in this work for far too long to even think that would work, right? I mean, there's not a one-size-fits-all for anything. Every college is unique, and not only are we unique as a college, our students, the demographics of our students change regularly. And so to think that we could put something in place that worked somewhere else really would be foolish. However, I think we can learn from those examples, and that's kind of hopefully what I think we'll be able to do as we work down this road. I also want to talk a little bit about some of the work that's been done on campus that is totally consistent with the guided pathways models and framework, things that Lane has been engaged in, from Achieving the Dream and other issues for many years, that are totally consistent with the guided pathways framework. And the question really becomes at that point is, how do we make these things accessible for the bulk of our students rather than just a subset of our students? And then lastly, we'll end with how you can get involved in these conversations, hopefully I think that you'll want to get involved with these, and then have just a lot of time for candid conversation. I don't think most colleges don't set aside enough time to just have conversations, and I think this is at least an initial opportunity for us to just have conversations about issues that you may feel related to this work that we're proposing. Seem good enough for the day? I normally don't like to talk a lot. There's quite a bit for me to get through, as you can see with this, so I'll probably spend about 45 minutes or so talking. Don't hesitate to stop me, ask questions. I'm comfortable in give and take. In fact, I prefer that. Okay. I just want to kind of refresh. The last time we got to talk together in any kind of formal group was at Fall In-Service. And at Fall In-Service, we kind of just reviewed our mission and core themes, and we looked at some of the strategic priorities that were listed for the campus. And you'll see one of them as it relates to student success. And I should also state that I really feel it also relates to access and equity. We did have listed in there as one of the things that we wanted to be engaged in throughout the year, this conversation about guided pathways and how looking at things from this guided pathways framework can really help us understand how our students experience this institution so that we can ask questions about how good are we at providing them with the information they need to be successful. Okay, so I want to start just with kind of why guided pathways and why now. As you're probably aware, a few years ago, the state of Oregon put some pretty lofty goals for itself, set some pretty lofty goals for itself with regard to educational attainment of Oregon residents. On the right there, that shows the distribution of degree attainment by Oregon young adults in the ages of 25 to 34. And you can see that there is a significant portion that has a bachelor's degree. There's a significant portion that has an associate's degree. But you can see that we have a large number of students, a large number of young adults that have a less than a college degree. And the state realized that in order to keep up with the workforce demand, that we have to provide a more educated workforce, right? And so they set the goals of having this 40-40-20 as kind of a little catchy way to look at it. 40% of adults will have a bachelor's degree or more, 40% of adults will have an associate's degree, and 20% will have a high school diploma. What's really interesting is if you look at that, those same kind of degree attainment, and you look at it just by ethnicity, right? Again, on the right is our goal of 40-40-20, and this now are the data for all adults, not just young adults, but all adults in the state of Oregon, ages 25 and older. You can see that this educational attainment varies quite drastically from ethnic group to ethnic group, right, when you look at it that way. And in particular, if you look at the ethnic group that probably is going to show the largest change in workforce in terms of entering the workforce over the next 10 to 20 years, it's that Hispanic category in the middle, right? I mean, you're all aware of that. We've seen our demographics at this institution change quite a bit. We're now currently about 13% Hispanic students, and I think that if we look at our service area, there's a much larger potential for that demographic at Lane than we're actually attracting. But you can see about a third of the Hispanic adults in Oregon have less than a high school diploma. And very few actually reach the degree attainment that, you know, we've set for ourselves for the state. And one thing that's clear, the reason why we have to be concerned about this, if you look at the workforce, these are people actually in the workforce, these are national data here, you see that over the years, that portion of students that had a high school diploma are being less and less a part of our workforce. And more the work is being performed by individuals that have advanced degrees. They have associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, or post-baccalaureate degrees. So we know that if we're going to keep up with this, and this is going to continue, we have to be able to get close to what the state has put out there for us in terms of degree attainment, right? So that's, I think everybody can agree this is true, right? And so we need to be engaged in being a solution to this, right? We are a solution to being able to try to provide that skilled, educated workforce that's going to be increasingly needed over the next decade, okay? Well, how good are we doing at that? Not laying the state, right? So if you can see, I can't go over there, but just look towards the bottom, okay? If you look in the green, that's completed any college credential. Where does the state of Oregon sit? Second from the bottom. Where are we at? We're in the neighborhood of 35% or so after 6 years of enrolling, saying that they're going to get a degree or a credential. Only about a third of those students 6 years later had something to show for those efforts, right? 6 years. If you look at the ones that completed a community college award, this is a degree or certificate, you can see us right there, we're at 27%. So 6 years out, so all the kids that entered, students that entered in the fall of 2010, saying they wanted a degree or a certificate in something, right? About a fourth of them were successful 6 years out. So 3/4 of them not successful by this measure. And that's supposed to be 40% of our adult population in Oregon should be able to achieve that, right? And then a bachelor's degree, also 40% is what we're saying we want to achieve. We're at 8%. So again, that's the 6-year window, right? So students that started in the fall of 2010, 6 years out, only 8% of them had a bachelor's degree. Now, I know that we say full-time is 4 years, and most students don't get that. I understand that that's true, but if we were to extend this even to a decade, you're not going to see that number change much. Because what's happening is that people are stopping out. They might be working, but the issue is, right, and this is where I think what's happening to some of our students right now, they're working, but they're underemployed, working in positions that can't support or provide a living wage, okay? Not only are they not completing, the ones that do complete, and I think you've probably been exposed to some of these data before. I know we've had Rob Johnstone here, and he's coming again in fall. The students that do complete, these are semester credits, right? 2 years, a 2-year degree, an associate's degree, a 2-year associate's degree in semester credits should take 60 credits, all right? And you can see here that none of the top 20 degree completers, and these are California community colleges, none of them have 60 credits, right? Some mathematics, oh my gosh, that's almost 100 credits. So those students are, you know, if they were to go full-time, they're looking at close to 4 years to be able to complete of these programs, right? So not only are we not getting students the degrees they need, those that do complete, they're taking too long to complete, and they are taking more units often than they need to, right? So you can imagine that's increased time on their part, that's lost earnings on their part, and that's also probably an increase in debt on their part to be able to get these degrees. So we know we know we have work to do, not just Lane, the state, the country has work to do, because the stories that we're telling about Oregon and whatever, they're very similar for every state that we look at. We know that those are all true statistics. One of the things that we're trying to do, or that there's a movement, is to move away from looking at these kind of 6-year windows, right? If you wait 6 years, too much time has passed, and we really want to be able to be more responsive as an institution to be able to ask the questions of, are these initiatives working, right? So we want to really have indicators of the likelihood of a student completing rather than having to span the whole life cycle of that student to see how they did, right? So in order to do that, what has been developed are numerous indicators that would predict a student's likelihood of being successful, right? So they're called key performance indicators. And we did some work here at Lane with those with Achieving the Dream in the past. But these key performance indicators are correlated with a greater likelihood that they will complete and complete on time. Most of them are measured in 1 year or less, so you can actually see if anything that we're doing is making a difference, because we can monitor the progress of these over the course of a year. And they've been shown actually to be more meaningful and responsive than these other scorecard kind of data, looking at 6-year graduation rates and things like that. Okay. They're really centered along a few things, and these are semester, I believe these are semester credits here for this. But we have early momentum key performance indicators, really looking at students that earn a certain number of credits in a defined amount of time. We know that students that earn 6+ or more college credits in the first term are more likely to complete. Students that earn 12+ credits in the first term are also much more likely to complete. Now remember, define for financial aid and other reasons 12 credits as full-time, but you know if a student only took 12 credits per term, full-time for them is not a 2-year degree, it's a 3-year degree. And that's a 3-year degree if they're only doing 90 units with us, right? But in reality, they might be doing 110 or 120, right? So even full-time, when we say 12+ credits, we have to be honest with our students about what that really means, right? That really means if they take 12 credits or more a term with us, probably going to be, if they're successful, they're going to be here 3 years, right? And they need to know that. Also, earned credits at the end of the first year. Again, it's just logical things, right? The more credits a student earns, the more likely they are to be successful and complete. We also know that the earlier students complete college level math and English, what we consider the gateway courses, they're also going to be more likely to be successful. Certainly students that complete both college level math and English in the first year are far more likely to be successful in completing a degree than students that do not. Persistence, and I'll add to it, although it's not on here, is retention. Students that persist from fall to winter are more likely to be successful, and students that come back the subsequent fall are much more likely to be successful. Again, makes sense, right? But we need to own these key momentum points. And one of the things that's really interesting is that it's not really only if students earn the units are they more likely to be successful. If they at least attempt more units, they're more likely to be successful. Part of that has to do, I think, with the mindset of being a full-time student. And even if a student enrolls in 15 units but is not likely to complete 15, they're probably more likely to complete 12 than if they would have only enrolled in 12 units. There's a mindset shift that happens with a student when they take units. Okay?
A quick detailed question.
Yeah.
Completion of college English, is that just writing one, or is that like
would be the first, what's freshman composition. So here would be writing 121. So it's that entry-level freshman composition class. And math would be either college algebra or statistics. Yeah. Okay. So I want to spend a little bit of time looking at some of those data that we just talked about and highlight who our students are with regard to that. Now, there's always an initial response to question the data. Sometimes we have to do that, right? But I would like for us at least to try to look at this with an understanding that, at least for the first approximation, the conversation we're going to have, let's believe the data. They're the data we submit to the government. So hopefully we have some sense of data integrity, right? And we believe that, right? I also don't want anybody to think that when we talk about our students' data, we're casting any kind of blame, fault about how our students are doing. I have been an instructor for many, many years. I've had semesters where I have had good completion rates. I've had semesters where I've had terrible completion rates. I understand all of that. This is not about blame. This is about acknowledgement, ownership, and evaluation, right? It's about blame. We have the data we have, and we can either accept it as good enough, or we can say, I think we can do students a little bit better, and let's have a conversation about how we might be able to serve our students a little bit better. So let's look at some of these performance indicators. I couldn't find all of the data exactly the way that they were defined there, but I have a good number that are consistent with that. So let's look at some of these units attempted versus units earned. So if we look at the cohort, these are FTIC whenever you see that's first time in college. So these are first time in college freshmen that have indicated that they are seeking a degree. So these are not continuing education, lifetime learner type of students. These are students that are here for an award and the first time in college. So this is just a distribution, as you can see, for fall term, the distribution of the number of credits that first time in college cohort enrolled in, and then the percent that earned those. So if you look at that, most of our students, about half of them, we would say are full-time, 12 plus credits. Half of them we would categorize as part-time, which is less than 12 credits. But again, keep in mind, being a full-time student taking only 12 credits a term, you're a part-time student because you're not going to complete a 2-year degree in 2 years. If you look at who our students are that are really actually on track to complete a degree in 2 years, that's less than 10% of that cohort, okay? Then look at the credits earned, right? If we look at the credits earned, there's a shift. Obviously, we would expect this, right? There's a shift toward the lower number of credits earned. And that's because if you look at the average pass rate of credits attempted versus credits earned, that's only about 72% of this incoming freshman cohort in their fall term, okay? So even though we had 53% of our students attempting 12 credits or more, we only have about 30% of them actually completing 12 credits or more, okay? So the total full-time earners, if you will, and they're not really full-time, that's the 3-year plan, is 29%, right? The actual 2-year plan, only 4% of our students after their first semester are on track for that, okay? What's that? You don't believe it?
Oh, no, it's bleed down. The numbers from the top make 12 to 14 credits.
Oh, you mean on the earned? Yeah.
6 to 11.
Oh, on the earned, though, but they're coming down from the top. I think it's coincidental that they're the same. Yeah, it's different people, but the same percentage. Because a lot of those 6 to 11 credits are now down in the less than 6 credits earned. So we have a shift of the population down. All right, what about if this was in fall term. Let's look at the end of year 1, right? Now remember at the end of year 1, a full-time student should have 45 credits or more, right, at the end of year 1. If they're a 12 plus, the 3-year plan full-timers, right, they should have at least 36 credits, right? And there we have the distribution of those attempted. Well, we automatically see right off the bat a loss in full-time students over the course of a year. We all know that already, right? That's no surprise. That happens, okay? I'm not saying it should happen. It happens, okay? So we have already seen that. We've gone, if we look at our 12 plus, that 3-year plan full-time students or more, went from being a little over 50% to now being only about a third of our students. So by the end of a year, we're losing students that started with the anticipation of being full-time have been converted to part-time. Now, I'm not saying, I don't know why, right? Some of it is life happens, right? Our students have complex lives. Life gets in the way sometimes. But I don't also want to say that all of that is purely a student's choice, right? I don't think it is. Okay. All right, so that's our early momentum. So this actually, these data are not that uncharacteristic compared to community colleges across the country. There are some community colleges that have done a lot of early work with encouraging and having programs in place that encourage students to be full-time. So they have more full-time students, and consequently they also have higher completion rates. If you look at, in particular, the state of New York was an early adopter in this area. They have much higher completion rates there. We have to be honest, though. It takes resources. And you all know where Oregon sits in terms of funding its students' education rights. So part of this is money related and is a little bit out of our control from the sense, well, I guess we could be passive and just take the money, or we could be good advocates for our profession and we could lobby for higher rates of pay for our students, which hopefully we'll be doing. Okay. So that's our students in terms of their unit taking patterns. Let's look at their retention. And so retention, we're going to look at how well do we retain students from fall quarter. So you're just finished. So all these students that are just finishing up right now, how many of them should we expect to see in winter? And the other thing we'll look at is fall to fall retention, which is a really big characteristic. If you can get a student to come back to second year, they are far more likely to complete, by way more likely to complete. Fall to fall. So of all the students that you've got right now in classes, how many of them should we expect to see next fall? Okay. So we pulled the data for the past, I don't know, 7, 8 years. This must have been when we had good banner data or something. This was the easiest to get. And this is our fall to winter retention. You can see that it hovers somewhere around 80%. It has been dropping a little bit. Part of that is probably due to just a loss of a large number of students to the workforce, because we know that at post the recession, right, as employment comes back, students leave school, unfortunately, and they go work. But while they might think that's a success, they go work in a job that's not going to pay them well, and certainly one that doesn't give them any kind of upward mobility like a college education can give them, right? So that maybe has to be the way maybe we need to message the value of an education a little bit better. But you can see that those numbers have been, you know, roughly around 80%. We have seen over the past few years a drop in that fall to winter retention. So that tells you right there, I mean, again, we'll compare this. I'll show you some national data and some other state data here a little bit later. But right off the bat, from fall term to winter term, lose 1/4 of all of those students that start roughly. That is a big loss of opportunity for a large number of students, right? To lose 25%. So I remember doing Welcome Day we had 600 kids or something like that on Welcome Day, right? Well, about 150 of them are not, you know, that were there, eager, catching T-shirts and whatever, are not going to be here in winter. That's, I mean, it is what it is, but that's sad. Well, what about fall to fall? So that same cohort of students started last fall, these are the number that made it this fall. Right? So, and again, we've seen a drop, although the past few years, this has been hovering right at about, you know, give or take 50%, right, or so. 47% last year. So it's going to bop around a little bit, but hovering right around 50%. Again, the big loss there as we're coming out of the recession, I think, people going to work, I don't know, whatever. But again, that means that 1 out of every half of that gymnasium that was there, you know, at the beginning of the fall, next fall will not be enrolled in class. classes, okay? Now, some of them are still success stories, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. Some of them are still success stories, right, because they might transferred, right? They might have transferred without a degree. I think that's a wrong message to send, period, right? Because students are, if you look at the likelihood of a student completing a bachelor's degree, came from a community college, I think it's a 17 percentage point difference in their completion of their bachelor's degree if they got an AA before they transferred, right? I think the numbers are something like 60% versus 42% or something like that. I mean, it's a big difference, big difference. So again, that's, I think, on us to send the message that there is while you might think that it's in your best advantage to transfer as soon as you can, it's in your best advantage to transfer with the right degree, with the right courses in that degree at the right time, right? And I think that's something that I think, honestly, that's one of the things that still learning about the initiatives in the state of Oregon, but one of them, that transfer module thing, scares the crap out of me because it encourages students to transfer before they complete a degree. And we should be knocking on every door to say, what are you doing to our students, right? You're making them less likely to be successful, okay? I'm not bashful. All right, so now we know best we can how our students fare. Let's do some comparisons. And again, do not take this as, don't hear when I say this that I'm critical of our success. I'm not critical of our success. I've been on the receiving end of this conversation many times. We do the work we do with the system we've got. And I believe everybody does as best of a job as they can. Okay? The question becomes, right, if we believe these data that we're looking at, can we do better? Are we willing to have the hard conversations and look at our processes to see how much of this could be our fault, right? Because we haven't asked the question. So if we look at this where fall, again, this is a focus on fall-to-fall retention rates. Lane was 47%, right? If you look at that, if you break that down, interestingly enough, here's the fall-to-fall retention rates, whether a student took 12 or more units versus whether he took 12 or less units, right? Or 11 or fewer units. So there's, again, almost a 15% spread there in terms of students that are full-time versus part-time as whether or not they'll come back the second fall. So there we are, 47%. We're right smack dab average as far as the state of Oregon is concerned with our fall-to-fall retention rates. Nationally, 54%. Some of the best colleges, I hate to do this to the Dakotas, but I kind of take them off the top because very different educational system, very small population. But look at New York, right? I don't think you could argue that New York doesn't have a complicated student body, right? Just like we do. I mean, they do, right? New York was engaged in this. Some of the part of it is they have a system that encourages a lot of this conversation within a system. We don't quite have that here yet. We're working on it. But you can see there, look at that. They're up of 60% or something like that, right? So there is room to consider that and ask questions about, well, how are they doing things differently than the state of Oregon might be doing things? Some of it's money, because I think the state of Oregon funds an FTE at about $3,000. I think the state of New York does it at about $10,000. So that's part of it. That's part of it. I get it. Okay. But we still have to try to then do the best we can given our resources. Okay. So that's our retention and where we fit in on that. How about completion? By completion, let's do graduation and certificates earned, so AAs and certificates. And then let's also, to the extent we can filter it out, tease out these successes that transfer without a degree, which is better than not transferring, but not as good as transferring with a degree. Okay. So if we look at our 3-year completion rates, so this is 3 years. I realize this is 3 years. This is the Federal Right to Know Act, the data that we have to provide for students to make informed decisions about where they're going to school, okay? If we look at I put 2 cohorts here because I didn't have a complete data set for the most recent one, 2015, that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So I put 2 cohorts here. So 2015 is the cohort that just finished up, graduated here last June, right? 2014 was the year before, right? So these are 3 years. We asked the question, how many of those students that started, so those kids that I was with on Welcome Day, in 2014, 11% of them had something to show for their presence at Lane at the end of 3 years. 22% transferred without taking a degree, so they transferred out. So that's a success, right? So that's our 33% is our measure of success. Not bad. I mean, a third of the students got something after 3 years, okay? This year wasn't much different in terms of the total. We had a little bit more graduate, we had fewer transfer out. Maybe that's good. Maybe students are deciding to stay and complete the degree. That's good messaging if that's what they're doing. That's what we would hope. But there we are again. There are numbers this year, 13% and 19%. So about a third of our students at the end of 3 years have something for their time here, right? Some of them are still enrolled, by the way, but not, right? It's about 20%. Remember our fall-to-fall retention, things like that, we lose them as they go along. All right, so where do we sit? Now, graduation, I couldn't find the data for the most recent cohort, which just finished this past fall. I didn't have it for everybody, but I had it for everybody for the cohort that graduated in 2017. The graduation rates, the average for Oregon is 19%. We had at that cohort the lowest in the state. The highest in the state, Southwestern Oregon. Part of the comparison game in Oregon's difficult, right? Because half of our colleges have, so few students that they're going to bounce. 3 or 4 students that finish in any given year make a huge difference for them, unlike us in the middle. So I understand that part of it. But if you look at some of our comparables, Clackamas, Chemeketa, Lynn Benton, Mount Hood. I mean, those are all ones that have a similar number of students and probably a roughly similar demographic. So that's where we stand with them. About transfer out, we're kind of smack dab in the middle as far as the state's concerned with that. There's a high, again, at Oregon Coast. Again, a small college, so again, a few more students that transferred makes a huge difference that year for them. But you can compare us to the ones that we tend to compare ourselves to or that make more sense. I mean, look at us compared to Lynn Benton, Mount Hood, Clackamas, Chemeketa, in the ballpark with those there. And then the retention rate. This is the fall-to-fall retention rate. No, yeah, this is fall-to-fall retention rates here. If you look at this, for that cohort, we were at 46%. If you go back and look and see in 2017, we were at 46%. So there we are, 46%. Mount Hood, 66%. The lowest is Tillamook Bay. Again, that's a small college, so a few students makes a big difference, but we're kind of in the lower third as far as some of these are concerned. If you look at some that we compare ourselves to, again, demographic-wise, Chemeketa, Clackamas, Mount Hood, Lynn Benton, all up over 50%. And you might think 52 versus 46% is kind of in the same ballpark. That 6% difference is huge, right, in terms of the number of students that would progress through the pipeline. So while they're close, having that, just a few percent difference here is huge, okay? So that's who we are. You can go on. This is actually kind of a really neat website there, the College Navigator, and you can use different colleges on there and you can see all their data. This is all IPEDS data. It's all standardized data. Everybody submits the same data. And so that's who we are. as far as our students, who our students are in terms of their enrollment patterns, taking patterns, and then how they fare as they move through their life cycle here at Lane. Okay. Oh, I should also point out that it's interesting. I did pull, well, actually I didn't pull, I had Malloy help me out, some data that asked the question about average number of credits our students earn. Remember when we looked at the data before, there were a lot more semester credits. So this number should be 90-ish, right? If we can get students out right on the number. We're over in all of them. Actually, I think for the most part we do an okay job here. Less than 100 is good for a quarter system. So I think we are doing and I know there's been some efforts over the past few years to reduce the number of credits and degrees here at Lane. So we are getting students out, it seems, with fewer credits, but some of them are really high. Some of the AAS degrees, the applied science degrees, 125. I mean, if a student's taking 12 units a term, I'm not real good in math, but that's 10 terms, right? How many years is that? I don't know. More than 3. I mean, it's still a lot, right? So there is efforts, I think, to really try to address the credits that we have the classes that we have our students take, so that they don't earn credits. Now, I have to preface this next part of the presentation about guided pathways with, I am a diehard believer in the value of a liberal arts education. It's been incredibly meaningful for me in my life, and I really do value that degree, the liberal arts education, that training. I think what we have to look at, though, is that we have to balance that with having students get a good liberal arts education, but without having to accumulate, an extra year's worth of full-time work and to get a liberal arts education. Question?
So I was wondering if the mean includes mental education. Was that disaggregated, or is that all lumped in there?
Does not include full. I think there are only a certain, I can get you that number. That's a great question, and I'll make sure I do that. I have that written down somewhere. It doesn't include every developmental class a student took, but I think it caps the number of units that can count to that. But I'll get you that number exactly. Okay. I don't, Malloy's not in here, is he? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I had the note on. I can't remember, but yeah, totally valid. Yes.
Does that include all the units that you took, as far as that would transfer? A lot of our students in the science and engineering math majors will take more classes here because smaller classroom size, less money while they're still enrolled.
So no, this is at the time they completed the degree here. So they completed the degree, so they applied for the degree.
They'll add those classes in before they apply for their degree.
Then it would include those.
Okay.
Yeah, it would include those. So that's probably why some of them you see, like the Associate of Science for UO and OSU are elevated. Those may not be wasted credits. Well, the credits are wasted. Those may have been credits that applied to the major when they transferred. More often than not, a lot of those extra credits only go as electives, right? They don't count toward a degree, but sometimes we have specific articulation agreements, then they would, for sure. So we have to unpack this a little bit more to fully understand it. But even so, this is pretty better than probably the national average in terms of unit accumulation. Okay. So I just went through this same exercise at my last 2 colleges. It seems like I've always been a year ahead as I've been moving to different schools, and have had these same conversations about looking at the data, accepting the data, not blaming, accepting it as what it is, and being willing to engage in a conversation about, are there things that we can do to improve those? Because sorry, when I saw 11% completion for a school I'm very proud to be a part of, That doesn't sit well with me, right? Now, there may be reasons for that. I'm sure there are contributors to that that are totally out of our control. There are. But I also believe that there are some things, I think, if we're willing to have the conversations about how we're operating, that might be able to change that. Instead of being 11%, can we be 18%? Right? Can we be 20%? And if you can do that, just that much difference, those are real impactful changes in people's lives, right? Bodies that are coming through this institution. Kids that came on Welcome Day thinking they would be in that 10% or that 11%, right? So I think that that's what motivates me to have these conversations, is not to even think that we could get half of our students to complete something. But I do feel we can get more than 1 in 10 completing something, right? So we have to figure out what is it that we can do. Well, part of it is acknowledging, I think, this, right? Anybody know how many of our students are what the rough percentages of our students that are first generation college students? It's about half, right? It goes back and forth. It is, this year actually is a little bit more than a third. We actually, for some reason, I'm not sure why it changed, but last year it was half. So somewhere between 30 and 50% of our students are first generation college students. Any of you first generation college students? I was too. I had no clue, right? I went to my graduating high school class had about 45 kids in it. Of the 45 kids that were in my graduating class, this is kind of pathetic. I think probably 40 of us started kindergarten together, okay? So the point is, right, is that most of our kids have no idea what it means to go to college. And how many of you have had this experience where I did this with my own kid, Pasadena, when he took classes at Pasadena City College. He came to me and said, I can't figure out how, now mind you, he's got 2 highly educated parents. One of them actually, was a faculty member for 20 years, an administrator for about 5 years at the school where he was doing this at. And he said, I can't figure out how to register. Like, are you stupid? Right? Maybe you're not ready. Right? So I sat down to help him. Holy crap. It's not easy, is it? So how many of you have had a similar experience to that? Yes. It's terrible that that's almost everybody in this room raised their hand. Right? That's terrible. Okay? Because this is what most of our students see when they walk in the front door of Building 1. Again, I am not being critical of the work we're doing in Building 1. It's good work. But this is what our students think of it, right? That's a maze, right? That's a maze for them to go through. New students don't, this is what new students really want to know, right? What kind of job can I get? How long do I have to be here to get that job, right? What do I have to take? How long? How much is it going to cost? Are we upfront with our students about how long and how much it's going to cost? I think we try to be sometimes, but I think a lot of times they think, like I said, most students, they think if I tell them they're full-time in 12 units, they think they're going to be done in 2 years. Okay? Will their credits transfer? Do you think students have conversations with people that could actually answer that question with them before they take those credits? Some of them do, but not very many. Not very many. And more importantly, this last one is really, really important. Who do they talk to? Sometimes, well, I've had students come to me. I've called many of you. I don't know, right? I actually, on Welcome Day, helped really nice students get really lost because I didn't know where I was going. But they need to know, who do they talk to? And more importantly, all of you have a very different role on this campus. You need to know exactly what your role is and how you can provide students. And you have to be totally okay with saying, I don't know. Let me walk you over to so-and-so, and they know they're going to help you. And I think we could probably do, I know I can, do a better job in general about being more educated of other people's work on campus. Just not to do it for them, obviously, but to understand who do I send these students to when they come to me with a particular kind of question. So those are the things, I think the data that I showed you for Lane really, honestly, are similar to the data when I was at Santa Barbara City College that I talked with people there, and I was at Pasadena City College, I talked about people there. This is not a Lane problem, this is an education problem, right? Community colleges the explosion occurred in the late 50s and early 60s, right? And it was really all about access. It was really about, trying to find yourself. But guess what? Most of those students that were taking classes then had financial means, or the college education was a lot cheaper. They weren't first generation college students. They understood the system a little bit better. They had the luxury of wandering around and finding things out for themselves. Furthermore, the community colleges were really built on a model that was really an extension from the universities, which was really an extension from the way colleges were designed hundreds of years ago, and they were all for the privileged, right? They were all for the already educated. So who was it? Was it Einstein that said, you're something about if you do the same thing 10 times and expect different results, that's the definition of something, I don't know, insanity. Thank you, I didn't want to say it. Just for the record, Pat said it.
Can I ask a question about sort of a larger question about our data? And so we have I don't know where I got this piece of information, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm under the impression that we have a larger percentage of transfer students than some of the other cities in the state. I'm wondering how those transfer students fit into the data that's about first-time college.
So they wouldn't be in that
They
cohort.
wouldn't be in that. And do we know what the percentage of our students on campus are who are transfer students?
We have the do I know that number to give you? No. Can we get that number? Absolutely. Yeah.
And
So
are any schools comparing that? I mean, because I know that IPEDS doesn't necessarily collect that kind of data, but I mean, I do have this, not to make excuses, because I think there's plenty wrong with
yeah. No, but we want to know if we're going to try to find solutions, it would really be to our advantage to understand the data as best we can. Yeah.
And when I used to look at transcripts when I was doing coordinator stuff, I was just staggered at how many students came in to LCC and had 3 or 4 other schools already. And I would talk to my peers in other institutions who also did transfer evaluation, and they did numbers.
Yeah.
And that may have been just specific to writing classes into English, but it was different.
Actually, we'll think about so let's think about what impact that would have on the conversation. In the meantime, I'll get the data as best I can, not only for us, but for other institutions. And then we can see what impact that might have on the conversation. Because I don't know, anecdotally, do we get a lot of others? Probably. I mean, if you look at it, we don't have the population base that would support the large numbers we have, but I don't think it's a real large number, but it certainly probably is a larger number than some of the other colleges in the state that are more rural, certainly. Yeah. But Portland, I suspect, would probably have a larger number. So, but I'll get that, Kate. Okay, so this guided pathways, for lack of a better way to do it, I'll call it a movement. It's not I hate the word initiative because I'm tired of them, as I'm sure you are. But it really is a way of just looking at how we're serving our students. So there were 2 developments I think that are worthwhile for this conversation. One of them is the National Pathways Project that started a few years ago. It was privately funded. There were 30 colleges that were selected across the country. Lynn Benton is the only college in the state of Oregon that was chosen. And basically the goal was to create these structured academic and career pathways at scale. So not just for, you know, lucky students or whatever, but for the college. And we've had Lynn Benton here recently to talk about it, and you've heard about some of those efforts with Davis Jenkins and Rob Johnstone coming. That led to not only just Oregon, but many states recently have decided to replicate this project at the state level, right? California, we just started it a year ago, and the college I was at was one of the selected colleges there. Oregon just started this last year. We applied and were chosen to be one of 5 colleges to participate in this. And basically, what we're doing is receiving support and guidance on how we have conversations. It's not about how do you implement what was done at Lynn Benton at Lane. It's about how do you have the conversations about these kinds of things to address some of those data that we just talked about. Okay. So I want to spend briefly, I'm talking too much, so I'm going to go a little bit quickly through this part here. And will we post this online? Okay, so this will be posted and you can kind of go back. But I wanted to at least briefly mention what it meant to what guided pathways were and what it meant to be a guided pathways college. So basically, guided pathways is simply looking at how we do business, being very intentful in our conversations and programming. And more importantly, the conversations we have about how well we're doing it, we try to do them from a student-centric point of view. So a student-centered kind of approach. And really, if you look at it, it's based on 4 pillars. The pillars are: 1, you clarify what the path is. Students need to know what's expected of them, right? You have reform and ask questions about how do students get on this path. Then once they're on it, how do they stay on it? And importantly, once they're on it, how do we ensure that they're learning something, right? And again, all of those should lead to success, but they really are based on a foundation of equity. Every student should have the same opportunity and resources that they need to be successful in moving through this journey, okay? So a guided pathways college, this is really kind of it, is you produce these clear roadmaps to what their career is, right? You ask what's their career, and then you have a roadmap to the career that they want. You have the intake designed as an on-ramp. How do we ease students into that, right? So it should be a continuous flow into this path. Once they're on it, we want to keep them on the path, and to keep them on the path, you have to monitor their progress, and you have to have routine, intentful interactions with students. We know that's what works. Is it labor intensive? Yeah, it really is. And then we want to ensure learning. We want to, as best we can, as they're taking these classes, we want to align those learning outcomes ultimately to that career goal so that everything that they're doing is being reinforced along the way. The goal is that if you do that, students should have less churning. They're more impactful, so they're going to accumulate fewer units. They're going to complete higher. They're going to have less credits. The time to their degree is going to be less. And because we're reinforcing these outcomes at every step along the way, we should be building those skills as we go. Sorry.
So I'm thinking that one of the primary concerns I have is how do we choose which roadmap to suggest to the students?
Well,
It's a pretty big area of concern for me. I mean, I think, what are their interests? How do we establish that that's their correct roadmap?
well, I think we have to.
Neglect that.
Yeah, no. I think we have to have, we really should have a well-developed student-centric career center. It should be upfront in student decision-making. Those options should be there. We should have conversations with them about that before we get them on there. And I think the other thing is that we do have to realize that we don't want to discourage students from changing their mind or changing their path, but what we want to do as best we can is to make sure that, to the extent we can, the paths are parallel enough so that if a student does change, they don't have to go back to the beginning and start over, right? So I think you're right. I think that clear roadmap is important. We really shouldn't decide for students what they should take, but we should inform them as best as we can so they can decide, and understanding that people's minds change, we should make sure that these things are aligned as much as they possibly can so that they do have the flexibility to move. Obviously, though, you know, if a student realizes halfway through an engineering degree that they really want to be a dance major, you might have to start over. But to the extent possible, right, we should minimize those as best we can. So you really, to your question, you address it from with the end in mind, and you really map this from completion, right? So we often do things from the beginning to the end. Really should, and this is completion by design, right? You really should map this from the end in mind and map backwards, right? And so at first I think we could acknowledge that if you were to look in our catalog, a student may not even know what classes to take and when if they wanted to major in something. We have some programs that are very well mapped out already, but we have many that it's a list of courses, and it's take one of area A, which might be 30 courses, and you know, so I think that that's part of this too, is articulate. That's that clarity part, that clarifying the path that they take. This is some of the work that I hope that we can get engaged in over the course of this year, is really looking at the programs we have and just asking the question, are we honest with the students about how you complete that, right? Can we visualize that for them a little bit better? There are some, this is from St. Petersburg College. I don't know that this works for them. It was really appealing to me when I looked at it, right? Because if you look at it, look what a student, how they advertise for a student. I mean, there's their path. Not only do they tell them what they take in order of the credits to get to that 60 and recommend when, in the red there, they've highlighted what the key student affairs or student interaction pieces are, the student services pieces are that go along with that. So a student can you know, navigate through there and know what those expectations are as they go along through there. So this is what we mean by clarifying things. If I wanted to study what is that engineering technology and get an AS in it, I kind of know what I need to take, when I need to take it, and what are the kind of interactions I need to have with other entities on campus to be successful. And I would also tell you, though, that they have a student support network that they call these students all the time. I mean, you know, they are really on it. I don't know what their staffing ratio is. I don't know what their resources are necessarily, but there's a very intrusive model in the students to keep them on the path here. Okay. So let me just briefly mention, and then because I want to give the rest of the time for some conversation here, some of our past and current efforts, and then I'll save the rest of it. I'll just leave it online. You can look at it, and then we can have some conversation. We have done a lot of things that here already at Lane that are consistent with everything I've talked about already. We've been part of Achieving the Dream. As part of that, we had developed the TIPS, the Timely Information Promoting Student Success. There are, what are we up to, 27 of them, some great information about our students and how they're progressing. And there have been changes in the way we do business as a result of the information that has come from that. And we're hopeful that it makes a difference in students. We do have career communities. We have defined 8 of them. We don't do a lot of these other than with I think our incoming student class on Welcome Day. We do this, but we're really kind of coalescing around these 8 different career communities. We've also had developmental education and are in the middle of developmental education reform here on campus. And I think if we look at, you know, what are the principles of the Pathways work here, just to kind of rest assured your comment about decides, you all got to decide, right? I mean, I have no problem sharing my opinion, and I will many times. And I taught biology for 20 years. I feel like I know biology really well, but I don't pretend to know exactly how it fits in here at Lane or whatever. We have to rely on you all to be able to help us, help the students get where they go. So it does really take all of us working together, and I really hope you all can contribute in this as we move forward with this work. So I really hope that you trust that we do want to work together. Cover your ears, Brian. You don't want the administration messing this up for you, right? You need to be engaged in this, right? You really need to be engaged in this. And we need to listen, and we need to be partners in this, because you can't do it by yourself. We can't do it by ourselves. It's going to take all of us, really, I think, to make this happen. So there'll be lots of opportunities for engagement as we move forward. We are working on putting together a coordinating committee for some of the efforts here. We'll have project work teams that will be developed. You'll have an opportunity to interact with. We hope to have, as I mentioned, some of these program mapping workshops over the next 2 semesters. We're going to have student focus groups. There'll be, I didn't know what to call it at the time when I was doing this, so we'll have lots of opportunity for discussions, info sessions, feedback, and whatever as we move along the way. There are some other handouts in the back. There are some handouts in the back. Make sure you get them that do highlight some of the opportunities that we will encourage you to get involved with as we work our way through these kind of conversations. As you do all of this and you think about it, I really want to just leave, I mean, these are, 4 just high-level questions to ask ourselves about what is some of the work that we can do, how well are our programs aligned with the region? Do we help the students explore the options so that they get on the right path? Are they aware of what the fiscal implications are for this, right? Do we monitor, and how well do we monitor students that are on plan, right? Sometimes it's easy if they're on plan, I don't have to worry about them, right? Well, maybe we do need to worry about them. And I think importantly, the most important thing, we do need to ensure that students are building those needed skills that they need to be successful in transfer, to be successful in their career, or whatever is next, right? So it's not a either or kind of thing. We really just need to, own the data, be cautious with it, right? And validate it as we can. But I think we need to realize that there are opportunities, I think, that we could make in these areas that would make a big difference for our students. So with that, my apologies for talking for an hour. I haven't done that in a long time. Well, okay, yesterday. But I appreciate your willingness to sit here and be talked at for a while, and certainly would love to hear any conversation, feedback, comments, questions. Happy to address anything. Yes.
You mentioned that completing a degree here is better than transferring out of a degree. You mentioned some statistics about that.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why students do that now is because they realize that
Yeah. So I'm going to repeat this just for the microphone. So the comment was that a lot of times students leave before completing a degree because the reality is that when students complete a degree and do ultimately transfer, much of what they have taken as part of their degree may not transfer and count.
transfer is an elective, maybe.
Transfer is an elective, maybe. Well, yeah, and if you look at it, we have a lot of built-in added units a lot of times. I think that's probably mostly the reason,
Yeah,
right?
I've heard that story from a lot of employees that have children.
I don't doubt that students that have an awareness about that beforehand, right, are doing that. I don't doubt that they are. I would say, though, then, if that's true, we know some work we can do, right? We can do better work with articulation, and we are working a lot with articulation. And I think we can do better as we look at mapping these degrees, that we make sure we are recommending when a student has a choice to take A, B, C, or D, we should recommend what transfers to the most places. I think that's the honest thing to do. Or if we recommend that, even if we don't recommend that, they should be aware that if they take X, it's not going to transfer. So I think when they put it in their degree plan and they add it to their shopping cart and banner, or something should pop up and say, you realize this may not count towards whatever. I mean, that's blasphemy. Yeah, I'm sorry, you got a question here
I was
first.
going to say, well, that's maybe true for some students. Still, the students, so you need some kind of degree are more successful than collecting a 4-year degree. I mean, that could be just a direct attribute of the student who does finish something is more likely to finish.
That's totally true. Yeah, if you complete A, you're probably more likely to complete B because there's something about you that's more likely to complete things. The other thing I would say is that, if you look at the data in terms of students that complete a bachelor's degree, they are better off financially and fiscally in the long run if they don't complete their bachelor's degree, if they have an associate's degree rather than just 115 units, right? So I think that's the other reason that we should really always encourage students where we can to complete a degree, because you never know when life's going to jump up and prevent you from being able to complete what's next.
So I have 2 kids in college right now, and they have gone through LCC. My son, who transferred to OSU in the engineering degree, was encouraged to take as many courses as he could at LCC, not complete his degree, and then transfer them up there because they would take all of them then. So his whole cohort, which is still working on a degree that started here at LCC, did the same thing. They took stuff with them as they could if they didn't get a degree. So financially, that makes a whole lot more sense. And I hear from students all the time that they take classes here and they can transfer them in piecemeal or one way or the other. So I don't think in all of your data you're taking into account all the financial realities of these students. They really are looking for ways to make it cheaper. They are a student at OSU and dropping in during the summer to take 2 or 3 online classes because it's so much cheaper than paying OSU tuition. So I think we have to look at it realistically. We have to look at it financially.
I agree, and let me add something to that. So the comment was sometimes students don't complete a degree because it is not worth their while to complete the degree, but to rather to take credits that do transfer and take them with them without the degree.
Yep.
I agree 100%. I would never advise a student to do that. What I would advise a student to do is that, well, and what I would advise us to do as a campus is we should be creating degrees that minimize the loss of units when they do transfer, right? So that they could, because I guarantee you that there's probably some lower division elective courses that could have been taken as part of an AA degree here that they ultimately may have ended up taking up at OSU, but didn't because it wasn't required here. You know what I mean? The major, whoever they were talking with. Some of the other conversations that we're having with, for example, OSU and other places is that they're actually starting to require that the students complete a degree here, but will also give credit for other classes. So for example, the articulation agreement we just signed in business, they'll give them 3 years worth of credit. Yeah, but for this one, they had to complete the AA, right? I think the business, they had to complete the AA. Yeah. But at any rate, I would never advise a student to not make the best decision. I think that says something, though, about AA degree, that maybe we can make that a more relevant classes so that it does transfer. And I also feel like, that there's still a number of those students that are transferring that aren't going to complete, and they're going to have a bunch of units, and they would be better off if they had a degree in a bunch of units than just a bunch of units. And I don't know what percentage that is. It's not an easy number for me to get, but there are some kids that aren't going to finish the bachelor's degree, and all they have is debt and a bunch of units and not a degree. So.
And I also think when you're looking at the 12 credits, again, it's a financial decision for lots of students. It's what they can take and work at the same time. Because, I work here, how much money I make. I work here, I have 2 kids in college. There's no way that I could have ever saved, or I can afford them at OSU. So if you look at the 12 credits, you're looking at kids that have to work.
I would disagree with that. Yes, a good number of them, that's true. I don't know what the percent, maybe it's 75% of them, that's true. But there are some students that are on the Oregon Promise that could be taking 15 units that aren't. Now, maybe they have to work at home, and that's something we have to address, but then maybe we can look at what we do on campus, and maybe we can make it easier for them to work on campus or to spend time on campus in a way, or to package their courses together in a way that allows them to be off campus some and on campus some. I'm just saying that what you're saying, I'm not disputing, but I still think that there are some things that are within our control within that. Is it all of it? Absolutely not. But I'll take, if we can control 20% of it, I want to control 20% of it. But we've got to figure out what it is. And I think that's what these conversations allow us to do, is to do the work that lets us figure out what can we control and try to control that bit, that piece of it. Never going, you know, education should be free. Yeah.
So I'm wondering how in the whole discussion, how adult basic skills fits into this. So the English as a language, adult basic and secondary education, that, and then also we have numerous bridge and pathways, pathways that are existing right now. How do those fit into the whole discussion?
I think that's where they fit in. I mean, I think that when we look at the data I was talking about was getting students that are, for lack of a better, maybe they're already college ready or whatever, I don't know. But the adult basic skills and the ESL, those have to be part of that on-ramp experience, right? So we have to do a good job at the handoff and the integration of the ESL programs and adult basic skills education programs to the credit pathways, right? So the way I visualize it in a roadmap sense is that it's just a different on-ramp. You have an on-ramp straight out of high school, you have an on-ramp from a displaced worker, you have an on-ramp from an adult basic skills, you have an on-ramp from an ESL. What the on-ramp is the stuff we have to figure out. How do you get them the knowledge and the skills necessary to be successful when they get on that path?
So we revised our curriculum in 2014 in order to create that merge, the on-ramp right there.
Excellent.
And then we've been creating programs that tie students are enrolled in ESL and also enrolled in a credit class at the same time, with really solid connection between credit and non-credit.
So that's something that I'm really interested in and kind of excited about exploring is how do we pair classes together wherever we can, because no one wants to hear the message that they're not college ready, right? Because we know that many of our students, I don't know the data for Lane, but I know where I was before, many of our students that would have not been college ready in English and math were very successful in college level work. I mean, they could do college level work and were really successful. Yet the message we give them from the day one is they're not college ready because they didn't test or place right. So I think anything we can do to marry that support, just-in-time support, with credit curriculum, I think that's a win-win, time-wise, money-wise, and to me, it's kind of just the ethical thing to do, because you're not creating this caste system among students. But that's a lot of work. Yeah.
This is a question on like the 3 or 4 credit classes. Is that somewhere in the data where it shows the differential? Because a student could take 3 4-credit classes versus 4 3-credit classes, and the difference in the work, is that because we have 4-credit classes on this campus, we have 3 credit classes,
of course.
And that's and 5 credits. So is that somewhere affecting students' their ability to meet those credit levels? And is that something that we look at? Because I know many, like I teach 3 credit classes that should be 4 credit classes.
Why should they be 4 credit classes? I'll start with that one. You don't have to answer me, but
Not then we should be making them 4 credits by adding more. There should be some things that they match clearly to what the universities.
oh, okay. Well, then I'm totally in support of that.
Yeah.
If that's the rationale.
That's to make it so that
Yeah.
it's like a clearly articulated, we teach a 4 credit class,
Yeah.
we teach a 4 credit class.
Yeah.
But
Well,
affect our students here that we don't do those 4 credit.
I would say if you're waiting for direction to make that move, I'm directing you to make that move. In cases where, our curriculum should, we're a transfer institution, right? So to the extent that they're transfer classes, our transfer curriculum should be aligned as best it can with the transfer institution. Now, that's difficult when we're transferring to, a dozen different things out there that all have something different. But I think most people can agree for most classes, whether it should be 3-unit, 4-unit, 5-unit kind of classes, and we should have them at that right level for transfer, absolutely. What I'm not in favor of, which I thought you were going, is that our students just need more time, so let's make a 3-unit class a 4-unit class to give them more time.
No.
I've seen that story over and over again, and that's just student blaming. You know what I mean? Because we want it to be appropriate, right? So to the extent that they should be appropriate. Now, on the data, it didn't disaggregate it by looking at what the program of study was, right? So some of those units, a class was probably 5 credits, some of it a class was 1 credit. It just depended. They were just total credits. Yeah. Darren.
2 related topics that are near and dear to me. One is advising, and 2 of the last 4 bullets that you had up there, place to start, directly related to advising and lots of other things. Although we have highly talented, highly skilled advisors, and our high schools have highly talented, highly skilled, all highly committed guidance counselors, in an overall sense, looking at all the students we serve, what we provide is severely insufficient across the board. And that's a problem everywhere. I think it's actually worse in Oregon than a lot of places.
I think so too.
And I think for our guided pathways effort to be as successful as it can be, we've got to look long and hard at how we provide advising that is needed, both for Lane students and high school students that we hope are coming to Lane. We've got to really look at that, and I think we've got to be creative and look at potentially different models for providing that advising. The second connected piece is, and I would love to know the percentage if it's possible to get. We talk about 50% first generation. What's the percentage of students, FTIC students, that come to Lane that either have no idea what their end goal is, because that's where we want to start with it. They have no idea, or they don't have a very good idea at all, but they believe that coming to college is good for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that fits with the advising. I think we need to have a focused strategy. And again, it'd be great to know, what is that? And that could be 20%, 30%, 50% of our students. And if I'm anywhere close, we need to have a focused strategy, because they can't start yet. They're having a really hard time starting with the end goal in mind. They have no idea. And I see that quite a bit.
So I'm just going to repeat it just for this. So the comment was about advising, the need to have good, adequate advising for students, also to link advising to career and choices of classes. I think that we will never be able to have the number of advisors, if we're going to just stick with advisors, right, that we would need to be able to provide what I think is the amount of touch points that a student needs to be successful or to increase their likelihood of being successful over the course of their career. But I also believe that if you look at a interdisciplinary, my family's all in, my wife and daughter and all in healthcare, right? If you look at an interdisciplinary team approach to care of a student, right? Obviously an advisor plays a critical role in that, but I think there's roles for other things. We have to, there's roles for counselors, there's roles for faculty mentors, there's role for student peer mentors, right? There's role for student success coaches and things like that. So there are roles that different people can play, that if these people are all trained well and understand their role and what they can provide to a student, that student's better off if we agree that we're going to have this team approach and we stay within our lane, right? And some things can be handled, I can hire a whole lot of student peer advisors and maybe keep them from having to go work at McDonald's or something, if I can identify that kind of information that's appropriate for them to give to students. And actually probably many times better received by the student coming from a peer than from me or you, right? But we have to know what that information is, right? And we have to be able to define what the roles and responsibilities are of these team members and provide them with the resources. There are also a lot of, I'm not a firm believer in technology fixes, but there are technology helps to all of these things, right, that help us interact with students more conveniently in a way that is more meaningful to them. And I think we ought to explore some of those to the extent that we don't have them already. Yeah.
So just by enrolling in TRIO, which our qualifier is first generation student, and then secondary needs grant, students have twice likely to complete a degree. And so I just want to say, it's not rocket science that it works. All the things that Guided Pathways has brought to the table is what our program has been utilizing, or that program has been utilizing for years. And those numbers we get from Lane are students that are eligible for TRIO that don't enroll, and those that do, same qualifiers, right? Same data sources, twice as likely. And our results have been above 84, 88% consistently. And it's the problem. And so what I want to say is it's not independent of Lane.
Right.
It's just that added piece to the academic advisor. But it is that one-on-one attention all term long.
Yeah, it is.
That little extra support. And I want to say from STEM perspective, so I'm very naive about the other programs, but I was just amazed that all programs didn't have this layout. So if you are an engineering student, you almost automatically come to the table knowing you're going to take 3 years, because they are not prepared coming in to take a 200 level chemistry and a 200 level physics and a 200 level math right that coming in the door. But they are getting that support from us as a community college to build those math skills to get to that level when they transfer. I don't know if I articulated that.
No, you did. So again, I'm
There's
going
no room. There's
comment.
no room out there for all the other stuff to get in your credits. And so they are learning that if I take this organic chemistry here at Lane, which will transfer over to the U of O later, it's much smaller classroom dynamics. So I'm graduating with more units.
Right.
Which is why I asked to make sure I understood that.
Right. So I'm just going to repeat it here and then make a comment, and then I'll end for the day. So there was a comment from the audience about TRIO and what TRIO programs provide and the success rates from students that participate in TRIO. So absolutely. We have many programs on campus that are consistent with everything I've talked about here. TRIO is one of them, actually. It's very intrusive advising. It's a high touch. It's very pointed. The students know what they need to take, when they need to take it. It's just in time interaction. Absolutely. The other groups that do well are student athletes because they have the support mechanisms in place. There's accountability and all of that. Every student should have the opportunity to have the experience that every TRIO student has. Not only that, I would say every student should not have a choice about whether they have the opportunity that our TRIO students have, because if you look at the data, they're the same students, but yet they perform at a much different rate. I do think, obviously, we don't have the financial ability to provide that level of support to every student. I do think, though, we can look at where we do spend our money, how our current processes for the vast majority of our students are, and ask how can we retinker them a little bit so they can be more similar, at least to something like that. So maybe we're not going to see the doubling like you see in TRIO, but we might see 10% increase or something as a result of that. And I think that if I can end on that, that's really what, it's hard for me to articulate what Guided Pathways is when people ask me. It's because we don't have it yet, right? And the things that are out there, some of the components of them might work here, some of them might not work here. But what it is exactly that. Having the conversations on campus about how can we take the average student population that's going to complete at the 11% rate and get them closer, at least. We're not going to get them to 80% or something, but can we get them to? I believe we can. We can't guarantee we won't if we don't have the conversations and aren't willing to look at how we're doing everything and being willing to try to change some things. That's really what this is about. So to me, when people ask you what guided pathways are or whatever, I think that if you could tell them that, it's the ability to have the conversation about providing support to students, to the general student body, so that they can be more successful. That's all it is. What will be changed? I don't know. Something, right? But I don't know what it is. Will your jobs change? Yeah, probably, maybe, I don't know. Some might, right? Some might not change because it depends on what processes change. I don't know what that answer is, but I think we owe it to each other. We owe it to, in particular, our students to be comfortable enough to understand that we are all on the same page. We're not blaming anybody, but we're going to have this uncomfortable conversation about why are we at 11% or why are we at 50%? So that maybe then we can be next year having the conversation and about why we're at 14% instead of 11% or something like that, right? That's all we can ask for. That's all I would ever ask any of you to do. So really, thank you for coming and putting up with me for an hour and a half. That takes a lot. Just ask my wife. No, don't ask. Anyhow, thank you all.